Cameron, actually, I was going to ask you about one thing that I was dealing with
Yes.
with the story was how Mary became pregnant.
Oh, yes.
And so I had to actually include that in one of the stories, but I thought that it was fascinating by the time that I read your articles that you sent to me, that actually it is Gabriel who impregnates Mary in the Christmas story, according to Islam, by blowing into her sleeve.
Yeah, there's a physical action. He does not have intercourse with her, but there is an action.
Well, right, because I was thinking that there could be a telling of the story where there's something a bit more physical between Gabriel and the Virgin Mary.
Yeah, but that
wouldn't be the Islamic version.
Yes. Well, that also wouldn't fulfill the archetype of the miraculous birth.
So instead we have the blowing of the sleeve.
Yes, the air, because he's the spirit of God. So breath is spirit. So that's it. Yeah, I mean, look, if one is not a believer in the tradition, one can interpret that to mean Gabriel is the father of Jesus. And I'm sure, and we know that critics of Christianity claimed, well, we don't know this. We know this for a fact, that Jesus had accusations of paternity his entire life. We know that from early sources because his critics, the Jewish sources we have that criticize Christianity from the 1st and 2nd century, called Jesus a mamzer, which is an illegitimate child. They call him that, right? The critics, and then you have, books like Toledat Yeshu and other stories in the Talmud that were done as Jewish criticisms of Christianity, because they're also being criticized by Christians and so they're responding with their own very ugly criticisms. They're getting ugly criticism, they're giving back, right? And so in these stories, Jesus, in those early Jewish stories, is the son of a Roman soldier. They even have a name, Panthera. They give him a name that Panthera impregnated Mary, and basically the people his family made up this miraculous story so she wouldn't get killed, but that he was the illegitimate son of a Roman soldier. And so, that's the story. And here's a fascinating thing. So there's this guy, James Tabor, who is a scholar of Christianity, right? And of early Christianity. And he went and he actually researched Roman archive to see if there was any soldier named Panthera in Jesus's time that would have been there. And he found one dude. He found a guy. He found this Lucius something Pandera, and he found the guy's grave in Rome. There's a Roman record of this guy being sent in a legion to Palestine at the time that Jesus would have been born. And he was like a local commander. He wasn't like a Joe, but he was somebody that people knew who this Pandera was, like this local sergeant or whatever. And then he comes back and he's got like a military barrel. They found his gravestone, in Rome. And so obviously as a Muslim, I don't believe that version of the story, but that's the other version, that this isn't, that this whole story is made up to cover up an illegitimate birth. And that's what critics of Christianity and Islam would say.
I want to bring another quote from this book, because he talks a lot about, so if anyone wants to reference this, it's on page 265 in the Hero of the Thousand Faces. He's talking about the commonality of these miraculous birth type stories throughout the world. And he says the story meaning like some sort of a miraculous birth. He's calling it a virgin birth, but I think that's the wrong phrase, because that's not all these characters are always necessarily virgins, but it's that they're not having intercourse. They're having a child some other way. So the story is recounted everywhere, and with such striking uniformity of the main contours that the early Christian missionaries were forced to think that the devil himself must be throwing up mockeries of their teaching wherever they set their hand. He gives an example from South America where there was some sort of what was it? It was some sort of an expectation of some supernatural being that was going to come. I'm trying to see what it was. It wasn't a god per se. The sun was going to, there was an incarnation coming. It was not yet coming to pass, but it was like the sun was going to, the son was going to take the flesh in the womb of a virgin. So in this case, it is a virgin. And so someone was going to conceive by the rays of the sun. So there were a bunch of girls that were going out, letting themselves bask in the sunlight, hoping they were going to be the ones. And then one girl comes and she's like, "It happened. I'm pregnant. I've been pregnant because of the sun." And of course, it's hard not to be like, what's the hell? But that was the story. And that was something that happened that like these missionaries actually experienced, like at the time, like there was a girl claiming that, because this kind of a thing, that's just one anecdote, but one of my favorites is Cuchulainn, like from the Irish mythology. Of course, he had a very miraculous birth. There's a lot of examples throughout the stories of, someone ingests something, or there, a lot in Greek mythology, of course, with Zeus impregnates people, all sorts of, unique ways. But it's just an interesting motif that occurs a lot. And I think there's something about that means something psychologically in a way that I think a lot of
remember this, who Jesus has historically been identified with the sun, right? With not just S-O-N, S-U-N, right? You know, he is in Christian, he's the shining light, he's the sun, as in the, and you know, even the choice of Sunday as the central day of Christianity, right? It's interesting if you look at it, there's a lot of mysticism in this, and you know, in Manly Hall, the great, you know, the guy who, what was his famous book? I'll remember his, but he wrote this incredible book on the history of mysticism and religion that's really remarkable, and he talks about the choice of days of the religions, each reflecting a mystical truth, right? And so Islam, the holy day is Friday, right? Which in Roman and Greco-Roman culture, Friday was the day of Venus, right?
Okay.
And I'll explain what this means. So, and Judaism, the holy day is Saturday. And in Greco-Roman mysticism, Saturday was the day of Saturn, right? Okay. So Friday is Freya. Freya is, you know, the essential, the Norse equivalent of Venus, right? Friday, Freya's day.
Saturn, is that Artemis? Or is that different? I'm getting them.
No. Well, Freya, who was one of the gods, one of the Norse goddesses, right, was seen as equivalent to Venus and Aphrodite.
And then what is the Greek word for Venus? Right.
Aphrodite.
Okay, thank you.
So that's Friday. That was the sacred day of Venus in the Roman calendar. The sacred day of the planet Saturn was Saturday, and Judaism was Saturday. And the sacred day of the Sol Invictus of the sun, was of Apollo, was Sunday. Let's call Sunday, right? And so he said, if you look at the three of them, if you actually look in their mystical teachings, you know, no Muslim would say, well, we worship Venus. We don't worship Venus. I mean, it's a planet, right? And so, but what you will see is this. What are the correspondences? Friday, the mystical correspondence of Venus is the color green. The color green is the color of Islam, right? It is the official color of Islam. It represents the green of paradise, right? Saturn Day, the color is black. So you will see in Orthodox Jewish tradition, the black clothes. Black is very much, you know, they use the black tefillin, right, which are phylacteries they use for worship. Black is very central to it, right? And Sunday, the color is yellow, right? And you'll see, if you look at a lot of the ritualistic elements of Christianity, especially Catholicism, gold is used throughout, like on the Pope's robes and all that stuff, right? And so there is a parallel to Jesus being the sun, which is also one of the selling points for somebody like Luke, who's trying to convince all these pagan Romans, this is basically a better version of your religion. You don't have to abandon this stuff. You worship the sun? Well, Jesus is the sun. Literally S-O-N and S-U-N. So come on over. And so that's the fascinating correspondence. So we talk about the virgins being sacrificed to the sun.
Well, they were hoping to be impregnated by the sun.
That was
in South America.
But so God impregnates Mary, the sun enters into the world. And so I mean, there are these mystical parallels that are not obvious until you look a little deeper.
That's really interesting.